Yeah, Uncle Verl told the story that when he worked on the bridge, quite often there were cars under the bridge, railroad track. I don't know what you'd call it, but anyway, they were hobos riding the railroads. And Uncle Verl, some of you know him well enough to know that he could make some fun when he wanted to. He'd take water, look at the water, and probably on these guys on the track, on the railroad.
Were they on railroad?
But anyway, these guys would turn around and you couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were shaking their fists at him. So.
He probably didn't want to hear what they were saying. So with the hobos coming through, he was standing on the bridge and they were taking the train, and he would get them as they were passing by. So there's nothing they could do to get him back.
Well, if you look up there, up above, see how the rock is darker? That's weathered stone. And then right here you can see scars from the jackhammer holes where they would put the explosives in and break them off.
This mountain here was a dead-end stop for them, for the pioneers. They just couldn't get over it.
They had to go
Without
down
all
and
the-
around.
They were losing their animals and their wagons and everything else. And I
Wait,
don't
they
know
managed through a hole in the rock, but this stopped
whether
them?
they went downstream
I'm just
to
curious.
do that.
No, but this is a pretty long barrier of consequence. It goes up a long ways with being pretty hard to get over going that direction. So going down, I mean, you can see trails down there now that are probably
Yeah, they had
ATVs
to-
and
Had to
Jeeps
move
and so
all this material from over there against the mountain over to this way.
So they blasted all this off and then shoved it this direction.
Yeah, it took both of them and blasted. Some of it would come up with a blast, but they still had to move it with a cat. And those are
Well, some of it, like this sandstone up there, that's pretty robust stuff. That's not full of cracks and so on. But some of the rest, what was that?
Build in the Salt Lake
They
Temple.
go kerchunk,
They'll hit it and then they'll
kerchunk,
spin
kerchunk.
it.
Exactly.
Hit it, spin, hit,
Only
spin.
this is much faster than that
Because it's
it
an
goes.
impact. But it's spinning on impact. It's also an impact driver. Yeah, your hands
when
are
you
like
get drilling as far as you can go, then you gotta pull that out and get a longer pole. These guys were hanging on the side of the mountain with a rope.
Your bodies.
So once you've drilled, say, 4 holes, then what happens?
Put dynamite in it and blast the thing down. Well, dynamite, most of it was ammonium nitrate. Diesel could have it set off by dynamite. That was cheaper.
This golf track up here shows up pretty good.
Yep.
Wait till this car goes by. What was the process when they were ready to blast?
What was the project?
Yeah, the process. When they were ready to blast, were there a lot of people on site by then? Cats working down below and stuff? Or was it
No,
just...
you clear them far away.
Yeah.
How far?
Well, usually as far as you thought the rocks would go.
There Mike is.
Yeah.
Dad had an Oldsmobile and they backed everything away, but he didn't get far enough with his Oldsmobile and the big rock came right down through the head and the dashboard.
And Jay Haymond has a descriptive way of talking about that too, because he was there and witnessed.
Yeah.
So when they saw what had happened, they weren't in the car, but they got down behind the car and underneath. But he said when it was blasted from where it lived,
Wait, say that again.
lived
It was blasted from where it lived.
in the air and came down, and then he described it going through the windshield and through the dashboard. And Dad drove the car home that night.
I didn't know that part.
I'm pretty sure he did, because there was no place to repair windshields in wherever it was. It's darker.
What, Mike? Oh, Mike!
What the heck?
Two sticking straight up right here.
Poles?
You can see them from that side. They're not coming out.
So to give you some idea of the scale of this, right in the center of the lens there,
Here's my finger for comparison.
there's one, and as you go across, you'll see other posts here and there, and that's where the guys on the jackhammers would drill down to knock this rock face off.
Because they're sizable. They're like an inch or so in
You can see,
diameter.
look at all the steel all the way over here to the edge. Can you see them? The more pegs all the way over.
They would hang off from those cables holding a jackhammer and tap that drill down into the rock face. You can see here the pattern of the jackhammer holes, I guess. I don't know the proper terminology. That would be drilled into the rock, filled with blasting powder, and then the rock blasted away from the edge. So, and as those rocks would drop, they would push them onto the road grade here, and then when that was flat and level, then everything else just kind of fell off to the side. This is a pretty steep So Mike's brought back a souvenir. He's appropriately dressed.
Yeah, I wondered if seriously, I don't know. I just found this rusty old piece too. I don't know what it is, but
So yeah, so the drill goes, the jack goes over the top and grabs here,
Got it.
and that way it's got a little bit of
And
stuff
then
to
it
grab
also,
on.
see, this is hexagonal,
Blast
just
the
like
air.
a lot
through
of
the-
wrench nuts are.
So are we running air through the middle, Dad?
Yes,
So that, okay, that doesn't happen on mine. But so we're
Because-
spraying sawdust back, or excuse me, sand back.
That's the idea.
sand and
Only the
rock
sand
jumps.
off.
Okay. So the air would compress this down, then it would rotate?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're rolling up those
pounds.
squares. Look like there's a little here.
it pounds
yeah, I've
up
seen
and
it
down.
through. Oh yeah.
So the bottom,
Here's the statement about the bluff job. When the job was finished, there were disputes about what the company had done and how much they were to be paid. White and Haymond realized that the engineer had exceeded his authority in giving directions and hadn't included measured quantity for some of the road which had been completed. So in March 1967, approximately a year and a half after the completion, and after many meetings with the engineer, the proposed final estimate came in at $1,133,846. Long time to wait for their money. This amount was also not as much as they believed they were entitled to. Additional claims were submitted during the next several years. In 78, 13 years after completion, the final job settlement was received $360,000 more than the original bid, but it did not cover all the work that they had done. Marie later recorded, "It would be impossible to know all the ramifications and discouraging things that took place in those 2 years. Harold would be the first to give credit for guidance from above, for so many times the way things worked. It had to be because someone else cared, who cared, was guiding. The bankers, Fay and Calvin, were very high on their praise for the job that Harold did.
So what's the story then, Lynn? What the detail of what the company did here?
Well, I don't know whose idea it really was, but at least Dad followed through and got the mayor of or the governor of the state of Utah to go for a plane ride with him, who happened to be George Dewey Clyde from Springville, Utah. But anyway, he flew him over it and said, "Look, if you go where the river goes, where the road is currently scheduled to go alongside that river, it's like 2/3 of a mile. I don't think it's full 3/4, but anyway, it's quite a little distance around. And this way they cut through a 400-foot cut through sandstone, put the river through it, and made a waterfall for no extra charge.
So the waterfall is man-made by Whiting and Haymond Construction
Right.
because they were diverting the river to go around the road instead of
shorten
under
the
the road. Okay.
This is another place that I rode that camper cat for days and days. My first summer to work construction was when I was 14, and the bunkhouse where Grant Offerman was living or staying had a single bed on one side and a double bed on the other side. And I was assigned the single bed, and we had hot showers as long as the sun was shining. There were tanks of water on the side of the hill, and we could get a shower without too much trouble. My job with him was to assist the grease monkey, we called him, but his job was to see that all of the equipment were fueled up, that the fluid reservoirs that needed to be checked were done, and the air cleaners were dumped out and new oil replaced. Part of that was my job to see that they were taken care of. Yeah, the grease monkey was Cecil O'Neill, and he was a military, he was a veteran. He brought some of his habits and his vocabulary with him when he left the military. And Dad, I guess, received some comments from others who were afraid that this was too good a place for me to pick up that vocabulary from Cecil.
Right.
I didn't have a problem with that, I don't think. He could hardly speak a sentence without using several of his vocabulary. Adjectives that would offend some. A hard worker, a good worker.
Okay, this is not a Whiting and Haymond road, but to give you some perspective, this is what is on this side of the road. And then if we walk across the road, which was an experience to come across it, you don't get a very good perspective of the road. This is what's on the other side of the road. And it's about wide enough for the road and a really narrow shoulder, and not much else here on the top.
We're at Escalante in the petrified forest, and this is a 40-foot long log that they say is 150 million years old. Beautiful place. Interesting things to see. See that, Jim? Wheeler Machinery sold that.
I know them. Even I know where they are. Did you get your picture?
You're gonna get run over by a truck here behind you. So.
That's how they do it now.
Okay.
So while we're stopped, tell us both of you really briefly about like what did eating at camp involve? Who was your favorite cook? What was your favorite dish?
Well, this wasn't camp. This was one of those very unusual varieties, but it was good food. I think she was a good cook. Don't you remember it that way?
Yeah.
But camp is not a tent and a place that one goes and pounds pegs in the ground and sleeps on the ground. Camp was trailers that would be pretty long objects, at least as long as the trailers that we've passed today that are commercial trailers. But they believed strongly in well-fed workers were more productive than those that didn't have good food. So the food was robust. There would be things like steak on a regular basis, serious amounts of meat and potatoes and that kind of thing.
As we leave this town we just went through was Henryville, and you guys both worked on this?
We did. What did you do?
Where I worked when I first came back from the mission.
You said you were a roller here, Dad?
I think so.
And what did you do, Lynn?
I also ran a roller. I said, this reminds me of something that Dad used to say. He said, the man that knows how will always have work. The man that knows why will be boss of the jury. which, as I said, is not very politically sensitive, but there's some truth to that.
That is true.
Let me finish my story about the Waldorf. Because this 11-year-old boy is sleeping, or is told he's going to sleep on one of these bunk beds. And one of the guys came in when he was ready to go to bed, and he was sitting on his bed and began to cough and hack. And I thought he was going to turn inside out and die. I was scared. He turned to me and he said, "Young man, don't ever start smoking." And I said, I didn't say, but I thought, you got my attention, buddy. And I never did after that. There might have been some cedar bark beforehand that we won't talk about, but Phyllis maintains that I did and she did, but she does. But anyway, boy, that was one of those life lessons that 5 decades later is pretty memorable, or 6 decades about.
One of the other cooks that they had was still around when we were kids. I remember him a little bit. He was a character. He'd put all the meal on the table, and then he'd get one of his big long cutting knives and walk out among up and down the table, and he'd say, "How do you like this one?" with this big knife in his hands.
If I'm right, he's the one that also had an affinity for vanilla.
That's a good story.
And other things that had alcohol in them. So when he would put a little bit in the meal, he would put quite a lot in him, to the point that Dad finally had to fire him, let him go, because he was just flat drunk and dangerous. But anyway, to my story, and I was there when it happened, we saw some clouds go across the horizon, maybe over not those bluffs, but it was like 30 miles away. And there was kind of a dark rain cloud looking thing. Well, we saw that, and after a little bit we began to see some, besides the rain going down, it looked like dust was coming up because it was raining hard enough that it created runoff that started to go down the wash. And they did so in enough time. I say they, we, I don't remember if I was old enough to be any help, but it was a hurry, scurry, get it out of the road. And the water, a wall of water did come flooding down that area and filled the gravel pit with something like 14 feet deep mud. So had the conveyor or the crusher still been there, it would have been probably a $100,000 loss in 10 minutes. It was a stone worker from Indiana who said that as he walked through town, he could look at buildings and say, that stone up there, I'd put that stone in the corner of that building. Or, you know, kind of like somebody that would build a temple and sign their, or put their initials on the inside part of the stone. Very real sense. Harold Whiting was that way. As we traveled around the state, just hither and yon, he would be telling stories of when I was young, my dad built this road, or earlier we built this road.
That's how he put his mark on the architecture of the earth, was building roads.
Yes.
And that those would stand for, they would stand the test of time enough that his grandchildren would want to come back and take a look.
That's right. Building them well. Kind of like signing a painting after done.